Today we're going to be making this lower third in After Effects, and it's super easy to build, so let's jump in and get going. All right, so we are over here in After Effects, and let's just jump in. Thank you guys for following along. As we go through this, I'm going to give you the values that worked for me with the properties and effects. I'm excited to go through this. I think you're going to learn some things. I did. I'm always learning things every time I open up After Effects, so super easy. And let's go ahead with our first composition. So I'm going to click New Composition here, and right off the bat, I'm going to name this 01 or 01 underscore build. And these are just how I name my compositions when I build things like this. So it's easy to reference each comp. With the width, let's do 1920 and the height 1080. So we're just gonna do some HD here. Square pixels, frame rate 30 seconds. That's great. And then on the duration, this is gonna be short. So we're just gonna change this to 6 seconds. So instead of 10 where I had it, let's go 0.6 and background color black. That's fine. Let's hit OK. We have our first comp. I'm going to toggle on and off my transparency grid, and just to show you, with this whole build, I'm going to leave this off so I can see my transparency grid here, because we're going to be working with some black and it's going to get lost if we keep that black background up. So let's toggle that off, or on, I guess, and let's go ahead and make our first layer. So down in my timeline here, I'm going to right click, New, and Shape Layer. I'm just going to create that right off the bat. I'm going to rename this box 01. And I'm going to twirl down my box 1, my shape layer, and go to add and rectangle and add and fill. Let's twirl down the rectangle, and on the size, I'm going to unlink these. So I'm going to click that little chain icon. I'm going to change this to 1000 by 200. Let's twirl up rectangle, twirl down fill. And on the fill, the color I used here was FF8800, and let's hit OK. Let's twirl up fill and contents. And I'm going to select my box 01 here, and we're just going to add some effects right to this layer. So over my effects and presets here, I'm going to type in bevel edges, and it's going to pull up bevel edges here. Let's double click that. On my edge thickness, let's change that to 0.03. And on the light angle, I'm going to change that to -16. The light color, I'm going to click on that color box and change this to black. You can see kind of introducing our stroke in a different way here. And the light intensity, we can leave that at 0.40. So let's twirl up bevel edges there. Come back over to our effects and presets and type in drop shadow. And that should be right there under perspective. Let's double click that. Make sure as always, our layer is selected there. Double click drop shadow. And on our shadow color, we're going to leave that at black. Opacity, I'm going to take this all the way to 100. On the direction, let's just bump this up a little to 145. The distance, let's change that to 20. Kind of really get that stroke a little more bold down here in the corners. And the softness, we'll leave that at 0. Let's twirl up, drop shadow, come back and select our box layer one more time. And over in our effects and presets, let's type in slant, and that should pull up CC slant. And I'm going to double click that. And on my slant, let's change that to 10. That looks good. Stretching, we can leave that on. Height 100, all this looks good. This is really all we need right here. So I'm going to twirl up slant. And what we need to do right now is kind of animate this a little bit. So super easy on this animation. I'm going to twirl up my box and just hit S on my keyboard, and that's going to pull up my scale property. And so with my playhead at 0 frames, 0 seconds, and I have my scale property pulled up, I'm going to click the stopwatch to put my first keyframe in at 0 frames, 0 seconds. And I'm going to unlink this, and our X and Y are separate now. So on the X, I'm going to change that to 0. We can leave the Y 100% because we're not really going to adjust that. I'm going to take my playhead to about 15 frames. So right there, I just kind of dragged it over. So at 15 frames, I'm going to change this back to 100. So 100%, you can see we have our box coming out right there. So I'm actually going to select both of these keyframes. I can do that by clicking and dragging the box, or just clicking scale right here to get both of my keyframes selected. I'm going to right click on my keyframes, go down to keyframe assistant, and let's go to easy ease. This looks good. So let's go ahead and just scale this back out where we need to. So we have our in and out points here. With my playhead, I'm going to take this and go find 5:14. So 5 seconds and 14 frames. And I'm going to come back over, and you see with my scale pulled up, I'm going to click that add keyframe icon because I just want to add another keyframe at 100%. So that the whole time this is on the screen, it stays at 100%. And then I'm going to take my playhead, not to exactly 6 seconds, but to 5 seconds and 29 frames. That's the end of this. And I'm just going to change that X value back to 0. So we should have 4 keyframes. First one at 0, second one at 100%, third one at 100%, and fourth one back at 0. And that's all on the X. Make sure that's unlinked so you're not on the X and Y here. So if I play through that, you can see we kind of come in, and then at the end, come back off. So this looks great. We are done with our first box shape layer. And so the next thing I'm going to do is duplicate this twice. So I'm going to click that box 01 and hit Command D or Control D, whichever operating system you're on. And now I have box 01, box 02, and box 03. So now that we have these duplicated, let's go ahead and adjust these a little bit because you can see everything's happening right on the same timeline here. So with my box 03 selected, I'm going to click and hold shift and select box 02 as well. I'm going to hit U on my keyboard. So I just want to offset these just a little bit. First of all, what I'm going to do is delete these keyframes over here at the end because I don't want to offset those quite yet. With my box 02 selected by itself, I'm going to go with my playhead to 4 frames and see we're kind of zooming in here. I have that 4 frame mark, and I'm just going to click and drag box 02 to that 4 frame mark instead of trimming it, so I can drag these 2 keyframes. And then I'm going to click and drag to 8 frames, offsetting another 4 seconds. And with box 03 selected, I'm going to drag that to where the 8 frame mark starts. So you can see if I play through that, we're getting that offset look. We'll clean that up a bit, but that is exactly the movement we want. With my keyframe out, I'm going to hit U on the keyboard with that box 01 selected. You can see we have our keyframes going out on that box 01. We want these to start a little bit earlier too. So let's go ahead and find on the box 02, let's find the out point for that. So I'm going to start this at about 5 seconds and 10 frames. So you can find 5:10 on your timeline here. And let's hit that add keyframe icon again on box 02. And let's click and drag and find 5:25. So we're at 5 seconds and 25 frames and change that X value to 0. So you can see we're kind of offsetting that. We're going to do the same for box 03. I'm going to find 5 seconds and 7 frames. I hit that add keyframe icon at 100%. We can drag and find, let's go 5:22 and change that X value to 0%. It's good. So if I play that, you can see we're in and then we're out. That looks good. So we kind of have our full lower third motion here. A couple things we're going to do here is change the colors and the size of these boxes. So on box 02, let's get back to our contents. So I click down, twirl down the box 02, twirl down contents, twirl down rectangle path, and instead of 200 on the Y, I'm going to change that to 225. And I'll kind of scrub through here so you can see it more. Twirl up rectangle path. Let's twirl down fill. And I'm going to change this to FF0047. And let's hit OK. And on my box 03, let's twirl that up and twirl it back down. Twirl down contents. Twirl down rectangle path. I'm going to change this from 200 on the Y to 250. And then on our fill, let's change the color, not exactly to white, but to like let's go F1, F1, F1. And hit OK. And so you can see now how easy it is just to change the colors and the size of everything to fit your needs. So this looks great. Coming on, then going off the screen. I'm going to twirl at box 03 and box 02. So now that we have our main build here, let's go ahead and add the text. And we're going to keep this super simple. we're just going to have the text fit in here, and then we're going to mask it so that it follows that box 03 right there. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. So with our timeline selected, I'm going to come up here to my type tool and just select that T. It's up there. You can also hit Command T for the shortcut to get to your type tool. And I'm just going to click on my screen right here. And so with our title here, I'm going to select Arial just to keep it a standard font there. And then let's change this to Arial Bold. On my size, I'm going to change that to 90 pixels. And let's go with black instead of white. Maybe it's already on black, but if it's on a different color, let's change that to black on the text color. And right down here, I'm going to change this to the faux bold, and just to give it a little more thickness and weight to that font. So I'm going to name this one Jimothy Halpert. And those of you that are fans of The Office will get that one. Figured it was fitting for this. So I'm going to come down to my align. And if you don't have a line up, you can go to Window, Align right here. And let's go ahead and align horizontally and align vertically. Make sure we are right in the middle of the screen here. So if we come through here, you can see we're on the screen, and you can see because of that slant, I think we're off a little bit. And so we'll just adjust that here. So I'm going to twirl down my text layer. I'm going to twirl down transform, and I'm on my position. We're at 961 by 572. On the x-axis here, I'm just going to change that to 1016. That kind of gets us centered back up in here. So one thing we can do with the position, I'm going to take my playhead and go find 28 frames. You can see that right here, we're at 28 frames. With my position, I'm going to click that stopwatch and give my first position keyframe at 28 frames, and this is on my text layer. I'm going to go to 1 second. So we're at 1 second here. And we'll keep this at 1016 the whole time because we don't want it to move the X and Y. We want it to stay right in the middle. So we're just going to be playing with the Y axis here. So instead of 572.2, let's go to 588.2. And then at 1 second, 3 frames, let's change 588 to 536.2. And so we're kind of coming up to the top here. You'll see why we're doing this in a second, but we're just giving it a little bounce. I'm going to select these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, just to give it a little more natural movement. And then we're going to animate this off before it comes off the screen. So at 5 seconds and 1 frame here, we're going to keep the same position. So I'm going to click that add keyframe icon right here. And then at 5 seconds, 5 frames, let's change 536.2 back to 588.2. These are the same values that are over here. So we're just kind of reversing this. And then at 5 seconds, 7 frames, let's go from 588.2 to 572.2. And so we're back right in the middle here. So we drop back down, and that kind of signals our lower third to transition off. So obviously right now the text just is on the screen and just kind of appears and never leaves. So there's a simple fix to this that we're going to do with this box 3 layer. And so I'm going to Command D or Control D, duplicate that box 03, and that's going to create box 04. I'm just going to click and drag that above the text layer here. Let's twirl up our text layer. I'm going to rename box 04 to mask. And let's change the layer color just so we know it's the mask. I'm going to change it to yellow just so I know that that's a mask, and I don't want to kind of mess with that unless I really need to. And so I'm going to use a track matte or a layer matte for this. So obviously that's not pulled up. I'm going to come down to toggle switches and modes, and until that track matte option panel pulls up. So on my text layer, where it says Jimothy Halpert, let's select that track matte, and we're going to change that to mask. So we know that that is our mask layer. So we named it that for this reason. And so if I come back now, you can see our mask is bringing that text on the screen. And then if we keep scrubbing, we're coming back off. So it's exactly what we want. Play through that. Looks great. If you do go ahead and change this later, say you change the scale of this, you kind of extend it out because you have a longer name, things like that, make sure with box 03 and mask that you do the same property. So, if I change this to 150, I also need to change this mask to 150, just so that we have the same movement and the same mask, and it doesn't get all weird looking. So, but for right now, we're going to keep it like this. So now that we have our title popping up here and we have the big bold text, we are going to do our subtext or subtitle right underneath here. So click off that mask layer, back again with the text tool. If you're still on it, you might be, you might not be. I'm just going to kind of click in my comp here and back over my character panel here. I'm going to keep this at Arial, but I'm going to change it from bold to regular. Let's keep it a black color. On the font size, let's go from 90 pixels to 60 pixels. And I have this all caps option selected. You may or may not. I'm going to deselect that for this. And so I'm going to just type CEO, comma, Big Tuna Incorporated. And I hit Command Enter on my keyboard to get out of that text selection there. I'm going to hit V on my keyboard again, or you can come back up here and just choose your selection tool. And with our new text layer here, it's going to be above the mask. We don't need this to be masked or anything either. I'm going to twirl down transform, and on the position, let's change this to 1016 because we're on that center X plane that we did with our title text here. And on our Y, let's go 606. Let's go ahead and bring this on and off the screen. So I'm going to take my playhead and go to 1 second and 2 frames right here. And you can see that that is where our text kind of comes down and starts coming back up and uncovers it. So at 1 second and 2 frames, I'm going to hit Option or Alt on my keyboard and the left bracket. And then I'm going to take my playhead to 5 seconds and 4 frames. And that's kind of where it comes back down, where we positioned that. And I'm going to hit Option or Alt on my keyboard with my playhead at 5 seconds and 4 frames and hit the right bracket. And you can see now it comes back down and kind of pops that off the screen. So let me play through this, have something that looks like that, and comes back down. A little bit of a natural movement there. I like that. Super easy. We're avoiding more keyframes on this layer. Makes it a lot easier to edit this text as well. So one more thing we're going to do in this build layer, let's add a little displacement movement to this, just to give it a little visual interest, make it more fun, as the title says. So down here in my timeline, I'm going to right click, New, Adjustment Layer. And right off the bat, let's name this Displacement. And with that Displacement Adjustment Layer selected, I'm going to come over to my effects and presets and type in Turbulent Displace, and this should come up. It's under Distort here. So making sure that that adjustment layer selected, let's double click. And I'm going to scrub kind of in the middle here just so we can see. We're going to keep the displacement at Turbulent. On the amount, let's go 25. On the size, I'm going to change that to 3. The offset, we'll keep it there. Complexity is 1. But with my playhead, I'm going to drag that back to 0 frames, 0 seconds. And on the evolution, let's hit that keyframe. So we're at 0, 0. And then I'm going to take my playhead all the way to the end, back to 6 seconds. And I'm going to change this to 15 revolutions. So we're basically going 15 times 360 degrees. So make sure it's on that and not on the degrees here, but it's on this 15 times. And so if I play through this, I'm going to kind of zoom in here. You can see we get that nice movement. It's kind of a noisy look. Just adds a little movement as it stays on the screen. Some visual interest there, but yeah, this looks great. The rest from here on out is pretty simple. So I'm going to come back to my project panel here. I'm going to click my new comp icon. I'm going to name this one 02 underscore edit. And then same dimensions, 1920 by 1080, square pixels, 30 frames per second, and 6 seconds long. Hit OK. I'm going to come up to my project panel, click and drag that build comp into my edit comp here. So we're in 02. We have the 01 there. We're just going to do a couple things to this build comp itself. So I'm going to select that build comp in my timeline, and on my keyboard, I'm going to hit S to pull up the scale property. And then I'm going to hold down Shift and hit R. And what that's doing is bringing up the rotation property as well. So at 0 frames, 0 seconds, I'm going to hit that stopwatch on our rotation. I'm going to change this to -5 degrees. And then I'm going to go ahead and find 1 second and 1 frame here. You can see we're kind of coming at an angle now. And so at 1 second and 1 frame, I'm going to change that rotation degree to -3. So not too much, just a couple degrees more. And then at 1 second, 4 frames, just a little bit further, Let's change that to 0. If I scrub through that, you can kind of see it's a slow rotation and then a quick rotation to get back to the center there. And while we're at it, let's go ahead with our rotation and animate this out. So at 5 seconds and 1 frame, I'm going to change that from 0 to 2 degrees. And then at 5 seconds, 29 frames, and basically the end here, we're going to change it from +2 to -2, just to kind of give it some movement as it animates out. The other thing we're going to do with our scale here is let's go to our same spot where we have that 1 second, 1 frame rotation here, where it's at -3 degrees. And I'm going to hit that stopwatch on the scale. So we're at 100% scale here. And then where we have our next keyframe on the rotation, we're going to match that up with the scale. I'm going to change that to 110%. So we pretty much get a quick pop. You can see it kind of rotates, pops. And then at our next keyframe where we have that out, let's go with our scale at 110%. So we're going to go click that keyframe icon over there. And then at 5 seconds, 4 frames, just a little bit further, I'm going to change this to 115% so that we're coming up more on the screen. And then at 5 seconds, 7 frames, let's pop that back down to 100%. So basically we did at the 5 second, 1 frame mark, 110%. At the 5 second, 4 frame mark, 115%. And then at the 5 second, 7 frame mark, 100%. So just a quick scale down, pops on the screen, rotates through, then pops back off. So as always, let's just add some easing to this. So I'm going to click rotation, right click on a keyframe, keyframe assistant, easy ease. I'm going to click on the scale property to select them all. Right click on the keyframe, keyframe assistant, easy ease, and just to give it a little more natural movement there. That's really all we need to do with this build comp here. I'm going to twirl that up. And one more thing we're going to do here is right click, new adjustment layer. And right above this, I'm just going to rename this to PT, and that stands for posterize time. Over here in my effects and presets, I'm going to type in posterize time. And making sure that PT adjustment layer is selected. Let's double click on posterize time. And let's change that from 24 to 15. So we're just dropping that frame rate to 15 frames per second. You can see it's a little more choppy now, which I really like how that looks. Chopped up that movement. And then if I zoom in here, we're even chopping up that kind of noise texture that we gave it. Awesome, this looks good. One last comp we need to do here is I'm going to come back over to my project panel. I'm going to click on the new comp icon, and I'm going to name this 03_render. So this is going to be our render comp. All the properties the same as we have been. Let's hit OK. And in my project panel, I'm going to grab that edit comp 02, click and drag that into my 03 render comp. And nothing we're going to do here except add a picture or footage. And this is where you're going to drop your footage, where you can render this out on an alpha channel to pass along to your editor. I'm going to drag in a picture of Mr. Jimothy Halpert here. So I have that popped in here. I'm going to click and drag that from the project panel underneath my edit comp. You can see this is kind of a lower res picture, so I'm just going to scale this up, probably about 175, yeah. And so obviously you'd rather have footage here, but for the sake of time and rendering and finding a good clip and everything, I'm just going to use a picture. We can just add a little scale to this, so you do not need to do this. I'm just doing this for the effect of it. And obviously with this edit comp, we don't want it right in the middle of the screen. I'm actually going to come down to this edit comp and hit S on my keyboard and change it to about 80%, just to kind of scale that down a bit. And then I'm just going to click and drag this in my comp window here, kind of position it where I want to. We can maybe bring it over here. I like how this is in the middle, so we're centered up. That looks great. Well, that's it, guys. Thanks for sticking along. This was a lot of fun. I hope you find this useful. I hope you can use it in your projects. I look forward to seeing that. If you do, hit me up over on Instagram and show me at Timmy Dwyer. I'll have that linked up in the description. But I'd love to see what you're working on. Love to connect with you over there. I've been having fun meeting a lot of you over on Instagram. So as well over here on YouTube. You guys have been a great community, super encouraging. I've been loving all the comments. Thank you just for your support and for spurring me on to keep making these tutorials. And I'm just so happy you guys are finding value in these. So hit me up in the comments. I will talk to you down there too. And if you have any ideas, drop them there in the comments as well. So I'd love to help you solve a problem, figure things out, and continue making these so you can further your creative work. You can also find me over on bradloops.com. That's linked in the description as well. I have some asset packs, some free things. You can find the project files for these, and just some different things and tools that I've created to help you along your creative journey. That's one of my favorite things to do, is to give you the resources and tools to make your life easier. So thank you all again. I'm excited for the next one. I'll see you on that one. But for now, you all have the best day.